jazzed as hell to introduce to our fair audience Dr. Harvey J. Kaye. He is a professor emeritus of democracy at the University of Wisconsin at Green Bay. Harvey, great to see you again, man. Welcome back.
Good to see you. And I don't know if I mentioned to you, I was down in Milwaukee yesterday. It was it was.
You didn't come say hi?
I didn't have a chance. Well, it wasn't on the top of my list of things to do because it was my 75th birthday, and my wife and I were out and about doing stuff.
Oh, well, happy birthday, Harvey.
Yeah, thanks.
75, damn, man.
3/4 of a century.
I know you're an FDR Dem, but I didn't know you voted for him. Hey, let's. I certainly want to get there as well. Lots of things to talk about. But the last hour, Harvey kind of spent talking about socialism. I referenced a piece I found a while back on the Daily Kos, how 75 ways socialism has improved America. And the reference point to this was, of course, the Hurricane Milton that barreled through Florida, on the tails of Helene, right? And Governor DeSantis is informing his constituents and the nation the status on the ground, all the efforts and machinery, the people, going out and addressing, the government doing what it can to mitigate this disaster. And in every single thing he talks about, every single thing he says, for the most part, with the exception of his wife's charity that kind of brings things together, is a reflection and effort of we the people as socialist dollars paid for by the tax dollars. His salary, the EMTs, the trucks they're using, the roads they're driving on, et cetera, et cetera. Harvey, number one, do you agree with my assessment that seems a whole lot like socialism? And number two, if that's the case, then why do you think that the megas are so anti-socialist?
Okay, well, I generally definitely agree with you. Okay. But I have to say that this is a sidebar, and it'll play out in a minute.
All right.
When Joe Biden and then Kamala Harris fear the possibility that people are going to believe the Democrats are socialists, so they go out in public or in their news conference, I'm a capitalist.
Yes.
Right? I'm a capitalist. Well, I always say to myself, why do you bother to say that? I mean, and I mean this, why do you bother to say that? I mean, in their careers, they have been actively public employees. Joe Biden, Kamala Harris. So undeniably, they probably made many an investment along the way. That's their own, that's for them to do.
Yep.
But they are not capitalists. They do not own major enterprises. They do not, if you like, hire and fire people in a corporate setting. So, I mean, the Democrats don't help this argument either. But to come back to what DeSantis
hang on.
About,
if I may, let's talk about that for a second. Then the definition of capitalism we got to agree upon then, right? I mean, if I use the excess cash I get from my labor and invest in a mutual fund, does that make me a capitalist?
No, it does not. Okay, it means you're involved in this capitalist economy as something of an investor, but capitalism implies the ownership and control of the economic system, or if you, as the Marxists would say, the ownership and control of the means of production
and supply.
Okay.
Yep.
Basically. And so why the Democrats need to say that is always drives me crazy on the one hand. Now, to come back to your point about DeSantis, look, I mean, Florida is a truly horrific place. Every single year we see this kind of thing happen. And the fact is that the vast majority of Floridians are not nearly as bad as the people they put in office. I mean, don't forget, it wasn't too many years ago that when a referendum was held in Florida during election time over whether or not to go to a $15 an hour minimum wage, they enacted it. Which, by the way, we here in Wisconsin, with a real progressive and socialist tradition, have yet to come anywhere near accomplishing that. Okay,
yeah,
we'll be clear about that. The other thing is, I mean, DeSantis. He has a truly reactionary mind. Number one, not long before all this began, he signed into law something about that, or at least signed an executive order in the state. I'm not sure how it worked, that climate change global warming would not be a part of public policy in Florida. Okay. Yes. And then smack back to back. These two hurricanes. And by the way, these are not accidents. We know something has gone on in the environment induced by human activity.
Well, yes. Marjorie Taylor Greene says this is Jewish space lasers. Of course, Harvey. Finally, we're getting to the bottom of it all.
There was somebody on Twitter today who said, wait a minute. She couldn't decide if it was the government or the Jews, though in her mind the Jews are running the government. Probably
that's the same, right? Isn't it?
But somebody said if they're controlling the weather, why is it that she hasn't been struck by lightning yet? That was okay.
Well, innocent, apparently.
These are the same folks that say, the deep state is inept and the government can't do anything right. But then somehow, some way, they're controlling the weather and attacking America by controlling the weather. That's. But I don't want to go down the FEMA Marjorie. I do Taylor
also,
Greene thing.
Also I want to make something clear.
Yes.
I mean, for many, many years, I would go annually, and I still have done more recently, to Sarasota, Florida.
Yeah, me too, man.
At the end of January each year for Thomas Paine's birthday, because there's a progressive veterans group in Sarasota and that area of Florida called Veterans for Common Sense, named after the revolutionary pamphlet by Thomas Paine that literally called for independence for the American colonies and the creation of a democratic republic. So I was very much involved with these guys all these years. And I mean, obviously they have no affection for the likes of DeSantis and his ilk.
Yeah.
Well, but it's also the case that DeSantis essentially targeted the Sarasota area. I don't know if you know the story, but there was a really fine public liberal arts college in Sarasota called New College. And New College is basically meant to be the state's sort of elite liberal arts college. So it's a small school. It's right on the shoreline there. I mean, it's literally practically in the water. And I've spoken there as well. And this is a really fascinating community, Sarasota. So we've gone every year. And what I can't get over is the fact that lots of people have moved down there from up north.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And this goes all the way back to when they stole the election for Bush that time. And it is the case that they constantly target this area of Sarasota. So DeSantis targeted this college. He fired the president, he fired the board of regents, the board of trustees, and basically installed this, right-wing crew to run the place. So when I see this devastation that takes place in that area between Tampa and Fort Myers, and it always occurs to me that, at this part of the country, it's so pathetic down there. It is truly pathetic. These are the moments when we are so glad to live in Wisconsin, right? And I shouldn't laugh at the tragedy that's unfolding.
Of course, right.
But it is the case that somehow we've got to learn at the national level that there are parts of this country that really ought not to be settled by millions and millions of people. That includes Arizona and California. I mean, let's face it. I mean, we have so devastated the environment. It's unbelievable.
Folks, this is the Dom Salvia Show. That is Dr. Harvey J, Professor Emeritus of Democracy from UW Green Bay, joining me via the stream. I know, and I told the audience earlier, Harvey, as a kid, my parents had a condo down there. My grandparents eventually moved down there from Michigan, and said we'd go down. And I took my kids down there. Sometimes we flew, sometimes we drove, and we'd stay on Longboat Key or we stay on Siesta Key.
I know Longboat Key. I usually go to Siesta or Lido. Siesta is where my friends are. Lido is where. In fact, I just pulled out my sweatshirt from Lido Beach.
Lido is that the nude beach? But anyway, I digress, Harvey. Knowing that storm came in right there, man, and growing up there as a kid, I mean, it's the first time I really had a relationship with where the hurricane hit. You know what I mean? Yeah. So. Right. And I really feel for the people and some of the news and folks that are, they just rebuilt from Ian or a couple of years ago, and now they're doing it again. And I get you, but that's ultimately their decision, right? If you got the bank to continue to build your homes and you can, pay your insurance rates that are essentially another mortgage. I mean, okay, I guess. Harvey J, let's talk. One of the reasons I wanted to talk to you was about the reaction of the Teamsters and specifically their president, Sean O'Brien,
the
union president. just going off on a podcast, swearing and saying essentially the Democratic Party's done nothing for us. And the first thing that comes to my mind is the Bush-Lewis Act, man. What are you talking about? Harvey, what's your take on how this whole Teamster Uni thing and the lack of endorsement and so forth is evolving?
If we run out of time, I think I'm on the next segment too. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I was really astounded when Sean O'Brien went to the Republican National Convention. Now, by the way, 50, 60, 70% of what he said at that convention, I welcomed. He really did talk about the role of, by the way, the big capitalist corporations and what they've done to this country and the creation of the billionaire class, right? I mean, that made sense. But he wrapped around that rhetoric, I can't talk like that. I won't say those words, but he wrapped around that rhetoric some really, kiss the tushy kind of rhetoric for Biden and Vance and the Republicans. I mean, that floored me, absolutely floored me. And I started to wonder, what's all that about? Okay. Because it's inconceivable for a labor leader to believe that the likes of Donald Trump is a friend of labor unions. It is inconceivable. If the Republican Party has one thing that has been true about it ever since the 1930s, it is the fact, going further, but we're talking about deep into the late 19th century, they are, except in certain parts of the country, I admit, they have been anti-labor union. Okay. And I'll just leave it at this, so when we come back, I can talk more about this. In 1946, when the Taft-Hartley Act was passed, which was meant to really crush labor efforts, it was the Republicans who made that happen.
Folks, this is the Dom Salvia Show. That is Dr. Harvey K., Professor Emeritus at University of Wisconsin, Green Bay. We're going to talk some more on these labor issues, and perhaps you can chime in as well, 855-752-4842, 855-75-CIVIC. Got a texter saying here, Harvey, I seem to recall Obama saving General Motors. Oh, yeah, the whole auto industry bailout. I kind of remember that. And my recollection is that most of that money was paid back, unlike the billions of dollars that Donald Trump just gave to the farmers to pay them for his trade war with China. And welcome back to the Dom Salvia Show, 855-752-4842. Dr. Harvey K., Professor Emeritus of Democracy at the University of Wisconsin at Green Bay, sticking around, talking a little bit of a union, talking labor, talking Sean O'Brien, the president of the Teamsters. This is the guy that went to the RNC, didn't go or got uninvited to the DNC, was on a podcast, and here, if I may quote briefly Harvey, what he had to say, quote, I'll be honest with you, I'm a Democrat, but they have effed us over for the last 40 years. And for once, and not all of them, but for once, we're standing up as a union. Probably the only one right now saying, what the F have you done for us? And I'm getting attacked from the left, and we've given, since I've been in office 2.5 years, we've given the Democratic machine $15.7 million. We've given the Republicans about 340,000, truth be told. So it's like, people say the Democratic Party is the party of the working people. They're bought and paid for big tech, those big tech companies. There's more to it. Found that on the Mediaite. But Harvey, once again, the Bush-Lewis Act alone, and I'm seeing the value of that deal being done was anywhere from $34 billion to up to, if you believe the Heritage Foundation, will cost up to $600 billion. That seems like a pretty decent return, whatever that number is, for $16 million.
You refer to that act. I also recall, and maybe it's somehow built into that, the Dems bailed out the Teamsters pension fund.
Right.
I mean, how come he doesn't remember that kind of stuff? Right. So I asked some of the labor folks, when I say labor folks, labor leaders that I know, what do they make of Sean O'Brien's remarks? And they said, look, Sean's worried, his leadership is relatively new, and he's worried if he crosses too many folks in the union who actually might well be Trumpsters, that maybe the future of his presidency of that union might be in jeopardy.
Sure.
So one can understand that, but it's also it's one thing to, and by the way, they do make it a point of interviewing candidates. They go through the motions of doing that. In the end, they didn't endorse, and that's critical. But all of his personal remarks, and he's sitting in the presidency of the Teamsters, have been basically pro-Republican and anti-Democratic Party. Okay, and let's remember that. Now, undeniably, and I'm going to say this, I've talked about this before, it's for 50 years, neoliberals pretty much ran the Democratic Party, and they were not kind to labor. Look, the demise of the labor movement for so many years, from the late 70s onward, was a consequence, first of all, of the Democrats turning their back on labor, starting with Carter, okay, and then Clinton, and at times, yes, Obama. Let's be clear about that, okay. And it seemed as if Biden was about to do it. He did it for briefly and very nastily when, with the railway workers. But that's not the point. The point is that the Democrats maybe have been weak all these years for the very folks who they should worry about most,
right.
Working people.
Yes, absolutely.
But they've not declared war on labor in the way that Republicans have ever. I mean, forever, for a century now, and decidedly in the late 21st century, and even now. Talk to the folks who in the Republican Party, like Josh Hawley and others, who say that they want to champion the working class. Well, keep in mind, they may want to champion the working class, but they are anti-labor unions. Okay, so I don't know what I don't get it with Sean O'Brien. Now, I do want to tell you, I had something warmed my heart since I spoke to you earlier, and that was my wife was out. She came home, and I told her I was going to be on your show and what we were going to talk about, and she said, "Well, that's really funny because I just drove by the Teamsters Hall. We don't live far from the Teamsters Hall in Green Bay, and they've got the Harris Walls signs, big signs outside of their hall."
Oh, so, really?
Oh, yeah, no. So let's be clear. A lot of major urban areas Teamsters support Harris and Walls. Yes. And I think Sean O'Brien has been blundering on this issue in a really ugly, ugly fashion.
Dr. Harvey J, Professor Emeritus of Democracy, UWGB. And I can understand a guy wanting to keep his job, sure. And I can appreciate some valid criticism of the Democratic Party going back many years, as you have articulated, Harvey. But what have the Republicans done? You said the Taft-Hartley Act, right? Which will allow the government to basically stomp all over the unions. I mean, that doesn't seem very pro-union to me.
No, it's clearly the case. Look, the Republicans and the Democrats, whatever my criticisms are of the Democrats, I don't even waste my time quite often talking about it because the Republicans are truly anti-labor, fundamentally anti-labor. Yes, the Democrats have made kissy face with, Wall Street and kissy face with the tech companies and all that. Mm-hmm. All true. But it's one thing to make kissy face with them, and it's another thing basically to be in bed with big bucks and then go out of your way really to screw workers and labor unions. It's just unacceptable. In case how much time, I don't know how much time we've got left, but there's something I did want to mention before I go.
2 minutes left, Harvey. 2 minutes. Go ahead.
And this will help you segue into John Nichols.
All right. Okay? All right.
John called me about an hour ago, so I know he's coming on. Okay. He had on Twitter today, there was this thing that he highlighted. The thing he highlighted was, this is a line from the New York Times. In remarks about migrants, Donald Trump invokes his long-held fascination with genes and genetics.
Yes, and the murder gene.
And John's remark was, shouldn't the fact that a major party presidential candidate who is running in the 21st century, that he maintains a long-held fascination with eugenics be much bigger news than the way in which the Times presented it? And I said, so I said to him, I said, absolutely. And I said, this is the sickest election of my 75 years, okay, that I just cannot imagine a sicker election. I mean, there have been ugly moments, but this is a truly sick election that we're having to endure with Donald Trump.
It is amazing, Harvey, and it seems like it's getting worse the closer to the election that we get. I mean, Donald Trump, if he doesn't win, he has a trial, right? I mean, there are things that will happen to Donald Trump that he will have to deal with. And I'm hoping there will be a backlash against all this craziness that's coming out. I mean, eugenics, the murder gene, they're eating the cats and dogs. I mean, it is beyond the pale, the level of lies and misinformation and just the dirty, dark fall that he is having as he continues to deal with a potential loss in this election. It's terrible. And I agree with you there, Harvey. Dr. Harvey J. Kaye, Professor Emeritus of Democracy, University of Wisconsin, Green Bay. Happy birthday, Harvey. Thanks for coming around. Always appreciate it.
Thank you, Dom. Thank you, Jess.